What if the royal rift wasn't just about jealousy or duty, but a shocking private moment that Prince William says crossed every line? In a bombshell revelation that's rocking the monarchy, sources claim Prince William has privately alleged that Meghan Markle, during her time as a working royal, tried something no one ever expected, forcing herself on him in a moment that left him shaken and silent for years. Behind the palace gates, tension turned to betrayal, and the brotherhood between William and Harry may have collapsed not over press scrutiny, but over a deeply personal boundary crossed. What really happened that night at Kensington Palace? Why has William reportedly never forgiven her? And how did this secret twist reshape the royal family forever? Stay with us. The truth may be darker than anyone imagined. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It was the kind of revelation that doesn't just cause a stir, it shatters the silence of an entire institution. Behind the polished facade of royal decorum, somewhere in the quiet corridors of Kensington Palace and the soundproofed halls of Windsor Castle, a storm has long been simmering. But now, it threatens to break wide open. In the midst of family conflict, transatlantic tension, and headlines dominated by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's fallout with the monarchy, few could have imagined that the next bombshell would come not from an explosive interview, not from a Netflix special or a memoir, but from the very heart of the royal family itself. Prince William. Calm, measured, often described as the steady heir amid royal chaos. William has long walked the tightrope of duty, bearing the crown's legacy with stoic determination. But a line has allegedly been crossed, and his silence, it seems, may have finally reached its breaking point. Sources now claim Prince William has privately, and perhaps even publicly behind palace walls, made statements no one expected him to utter. Words so shocking, so deeply personal, that even seasoned royal commentators are struggling to come to terms with them. According to leaked insider notes and whispered accounts from individuals close to the Prince of Wales, William has revealed that Meghan Markle, during her time as a working royal, allegedly attempted to initiate an inappropriate relationship with him. Not flirtation, not miscommunication, but a direct and deliberate advance. An advance that William reportedly found unsettling, inappropriate, and entirely unexpected. If this claim holds any truth, and royal watchers will be quick to scrutinize every layer of it, it would mark one of the most dramatic personal violations ever exposed in modern royal history. The idea that Meghan Markle, now the Duchess of Sussex, could have forced herself emotionally, physically, or intimately upon her own brother-in-law, the future King of England, is not just explosive, it's institutionally destabilizing. For a family that has endured scandals from Edward VIII's abdication to the tragic implosion of Charles and Diana's marriage, this is uncharted territory. What happened behind closed doors? Was it a fleeting encounter, an uncomfortable moment that William attempted to bury for the sake of royal unity? Or was it something deeper, something that caused a permanent fracture between the two brothers, fueling the eventual departure of Harry and Meghan from the United Kingdom? Could this be the real origin story of the royal rift that the world has spent years trying to decode? To understand how we got here, we must rewind the clock to the beginning of Meghan Markle's entry into the royal fold. She arrived not just as a fresh face, but as a force of change. A biracial, divorced, self-made actress from California who had already built a voice, a platform, and a global following. Her engagement to Prince Harry was heralded as a modern renaissance for the British monarchy. The firm, for a moment, looked progressive, inclusive, and forward-thinking. But change, especially inside an institution that thrives on centuries-old tradition, rarely comes without friction. From the outset, Meghan's presence reportedly altered the atmosphere within the royal inner circle. There were whispers, of course, there always are in the monarchy. Whispers of jealousy, of clashing styles, of different values. But beneath the public smiles and choreographed appearances, a quiet unrest seemed to swell. Prince William, known for his deeply held sense of duty and tradition, is said to have observed Meghan with cautious eyes. Not out of malice, but out of concern. His brother, Harry, had fallen in love fast, and Meghan had taken the palace and the press by storm. William, protective by nature, allegedly raised questions early on, suggesting Harry slow things down. That conversation, widely reported, allegedly didn't go well. But no one could have predicted that the tension between the two couples would spiral into something even darker, something that, if these recent leaks are to be believed, crossed all boundaries of royal conduct and brotherly trust. Imagine, for a moment, the position William found himself in. He wasn't just a concerned sibling. He was the heir apparent, the man expected to embody stability in a family where scandal can shake not just relationships, but public confidence in the monarchy itself. And now he was facing something deeply personal. A moment, or perhaps multiple moments, that allegedly left him shocked and violated. According to these accounts, Meghan wasn't subtle. She wasn't playful. She wasn't misread. She was direct, uninvited, and unapologetic. What could she have possibly hoped to achieve? Was it a moment of confusion? A power play? A misjudged attempt to build a bond? Or was it something more calculated, an assertion of control, a boundary test, an effort to destabilize a future king? The motivations, if this account is true, remain murky. But what's clear is that the moment changed something for William. Deep down, irrevocably, something shifted. And it may have set in motion the chain of events that ultimately led to Megxit. This story, now finally bubbling to the surface, has all the hallmarks of a royal thriller: betrayal, silence, power, and a family teetering on the edge of collapse. For years, many believed the rift between Harry and William was about jealousy, about differences in character, or Meghan's difficulty adapting to royal life. But what if that was just the surface? What if the real reason for the divide was something so intimate, so traumatic, that neither brother could face the world, or each other, the same way again? The palace has remained silent. No statements, no denials, no confirmations, just the ever-present refusal to comment on private matters. But royal insiders are growing restless. Former staffers, long-time aides, and retired courtiers are reportedly beginning to share what they saw and heard. They speak of late-night arguments, tearful meetings, and a prince who looked haunted in the days following an undisclosed incident involving his sister-in-law. Some even suggest that Prince Charles, now king, was made aware and urged William to move on, to protect the monarchy. But scars don't heal with commands, and this wound, it seems, has festered for years. It's important to remember, at this point, the stakes of such a revelation. If true, it doesn't just damage Meghan's already fractured relationship with the royals, it undermines her moral authority, her public credibility, and everything she and Harry have fought for since stepping back from their royal duties. Their narrative, often centered on victimhood, on escaping a toxic institution, on mental health and freedom, would face the most serious contradiction yet. And if false, if these whispers, leaks, and alleged comments are twisted exaggerations, born from resentment or designed to slander, then we are looking at one of the cruelest character assassinations in royal history. Either way, this story cannot be ignored. It demands careful scrutiny, open minds, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. The days of fairy tale royalty are long gone. What we are witnessing now is the unraveling of a tightly knit family, not from the outside pressures of politics or press, but from within, from wounds buried beneath crowns and curtains, now surfacing with explosive force. As we begin to unpack what happened, how it happened, and why it matters more than ever today, one thing is clear: Prince William's alleged words are a turning point. And when the future King of England says he was pushed past his boundary, people listen. The only question is, what will happen next? From the moment Meghan Markle entered the royal spotlight, the British public was enthralled, curious, and, in some quarters, skeptical. But beyond the global fascination with the American actress turned Duchess, beyond the wedding pomp and media glitz, something far more delicate was unfolding within palace walls, a set of first impressions, awkward silences, intense glances that the public never saw. This is where the story of Prince William and Meghan Markle's relationship truly begins, not with headlines, but with subtle moments that would later echo through years of royal discord. The initial encounter between William and Meghan, according to those with knowledge of the royal timeline, was polite and cordial, at least on the surface. William, as the elder brother and heir to the throne, had every reason to approach the introduction with a degree of reserve. He had seen women come and go from Harry's life, some with lasting impressions, others leaving only a whisper. Meghan, however, was different from the outset. She wasn't merely dating Harry. She was stepping into a centuries-old institution and bringing with her a tidal wave of modern ideals, outspoken confidence, and media attention unlike anything the younger prince's past relationships had stirred. William, ever the protector, wasn't immediately taken by the whirlwind. Those close to him recall that he found Meghan's rapid integration into the family slightly unnerving. not because he questioned her character outright, but because he worried about the speed at which the relationship was progressing. To him, things were moving too fast. Meghan wasn't being slowly introduced into the royal machinery, she was leaping into it. And Harry, by all accounts, was completely swept away. At that first meeting in Kensington Palace, William reportedly kept his demeanor neutral. Meghan, by contrast, was animated. She brought a sense of American charm to the room. Easy smiles, enthusiastic conversation, and an undeniable confidence. She reportedly complimented William on his family, on his charity work, and on his poise as a future monarch. But those present at that encounter, discreet staff, aides, and possibly even Kate Middleton, felt an undercurrent of unease, subtle but present. Some described Meghan's tone as overly familiar for someone new to the family. It wasn't disrespectful, they said, but it lacked the deference traditionally expected within royal circles. William, who had been raised to understand the nuances of hierarchy, found this informality jarring. While Harry seemed charmed by Meghan's approach, William was reportedly calculating, measuring her words, her intentions, and her potential impact on the royal ecosystem. Their conversations reportedly ranged from casual small talk to more serious topics like press intrusion and public duty. At one point, Meghan is said to have spoken candidly about her dislike for invasive media, referencing her years in Hollywood. William, who had endured the paparazzi's relentless pursuit since childhood and had lost his mother in circumstances he blamed partly on the press, didn't object to her perspective. But again, it was the way she spoke, with absolute certainty, without the cautious framing typical of royal language, that stood out. Over the weeks that followed, William and Meghan had several more encounters, usually in family settings, meals, holiday gatherings, and official events. Kate, always a picture of diplomacy, reportedly played the role of mediator. She welcomed Meghan with grace, showing her around, helping her understand royal traditions, and encouraging a sense of camaraderie. Meghan, in turn, admired Kate's style and discipline, but perhaps felt constrained by the unspoken rules that governed every interaction. William, on the other hand, maintained a careful distance. He wasn't hostile, but he wasn't embracing Meghan either. That distance, according to insiders, was not lost on Meghan. She noticed the difference between how Kate interacted with her, warm, maternal, inviting, and how William did, measured, guarded, and faintly skeptical. And then, there was the unspoken rivalry. Not between William and Meghan directly, but between what they represented. William, the embodiment of tradition, duty, and the future of the monarchy. Meghan, a symbol of change, disruption, and a new kind of royalty. The collision of these two forces, one grounded in centuries of royal culture, the other shaped by modern celebrity and activism, was inevitable. Their early conversations, while polite, were likely laced with quiet disagreement. William would speak of long-standing protocols, Meghan might counter with how things could evolve. One notable incident, according to former staffers, occurred during a small dinner event held at Clarence House. Meghan, seated next to William, is said to have challenged the royal family's approach to certain charities, suggesting that the institution was too traditional in its outreach methods. She proposed modern solutions, social media campaigns, direct-to-audience storytelling, and collaborations with high-profile influencers. William, though intrigued by the ideas, reportedly pushed back gently, noting that the monarchy had a responsibility to remain neutral, dignified, and restrained. That exchange, seemingly professional, allegedly carried a sharper edge underneath. William felt that Meghan was overstepping, that she was criticizing the very foundation of the institution she was joining. Meghan, meanwhile, may have perceived William's feedback as dismissive or elitist. Neither raised their voices. Neither stormed out. But something passed between them in that moment, something that marked the beginning of a deeper misalignment. From then on, their interactions became more formal, less familiar. William maintained the upper hand in terms of seniority, but Meghan was not one to be silently patronized. She reportedly held her ground in discussions, questioned decisions, and made it known that she would not be easily molded into a silent figurehead. It was during this stretch of royal engagements that a curious change was noticed in William's behavior. According to multiple aides, he began limiting his private time in Meghan's presence. He made excuses to leave early from family events, requested Kate remain nearby during more intimate gatherings, and declined joint appearances that might place him and Meghan in proximity without Harry present. To those who didn't know the alleged deeper story, These actions appeared cold, perhaps even disrespectful. But to William, it was self-preservation. Something had happened, something that made him feel unsafe or violated, and he was putting up boundaries. There were whispers within the household. Unverified, hushed conversations about a moment that had transpired during a late-night gathering. A moment where Meghan had allegedly approached William in a manner that crossed the line, not physically violent, but deeply inappropriate. The details were never formally recorded, and no one ever officially confirmed them. But aides noted that William's demeanor shifted. He grew quieter around Meghan, more deliberate in his interactions, as if carefully choosing every word. To an outside observer, these changes could have been chalked up to stress or to the normal complexities of royal life. But to those within the firm, it was clear something had shifted. William no longer viewed Meghan as simply Harry's wife. He viewed her as a potential threat, one whose actions, if left unchecked, could upend not just personal relationships but the public's trust in the crown. Still, William remained composed. He did not lash out publicly. He did not confront Meghan in ways that would draw attention. He did what he had always been trained to do: endure, adapt, and preserve the monarchy at all costs. But those closest to him began to sense the toll it was taking. The usually unshakable prince would, at times, appear fatigued, withdrawn. There were reports of long walks taken alone, of evenings spent in deep conversation with Kate, of nights when William sat in his study, staring silently out the window. And yet, the institution moved on. Public appearances continued. Smiles were rehearsed. Photographs were taken. But behind the choreography of royal life, a fracture had formed, and its origin, if these accounts are true, began in those early interactions between Meghan and William. Moments that the cameras missed. Moments that now, in hindsight, may explain everything that followed. For years, the British royal family has operated like a fortified kingdom behind its castle walls, shielded by protocol, protected by silence, and defended by a network of staff trained in discretion. But even the most impenetrable walls begin to crumble under enough pressure, and as the narrative around Meghan Markle and Prince Harry began to spiral publicly, insiders, those closest to the events, started to speak. What they revealed wasn't just gossip. It was the kind of disclosure that hints at buried tension, internal crises, and moments so personal they've remained hidden for years. The first of these leaks came not through the mainstream media, but through whispers shared with former royal correspondents, biographers, and authors. Small details at first, nothing concrete. But over time, a pattern emerged. Aides who had worked at Kensington Palace during Meghan's earliest days as a royal began to describe moments of friction between her and Prince William that felt, in their words, off, unusual, and highly tense. One former member of the household, whose identity remains protected, claimed that William once pulled her aside after a formal dinner event and asked to be informed immediately if Meghan attempted to engage with him alone. The request was made, she said, in a voice that was calm but burdened. When she asked whether there was a particular reason for the concern, he allegedly responded with just one sentence: "There are boundaries, and they've been crossed." No further explanation was given, but the tone, she insists, carried weight. Another staff member who had worked closely with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge told of a strange shift in protocol that occurred shortly after Meghan officially joined the family. While royal family members often attend events together, this insider noticed that William made repeated efforts to ensure he was not scheduled to appear at any function where he might be left alone with Meghan. In one instance, a meeting regarding a joint charity initiative had to be rescheduled entirely because William, upon seeing the guest list, asked that another senior royal be present or that the event be cancelled. These changes, although subtle, were not typical for William. Known for his strong work ethic and ease in public, it was unusual to see him so adamant about logistics that, in the past, he would have taken in stride. Staff took notice. Something had clearly changed. Some speculated it was the result of a growing rift with Harry. Others wondered if it was something more personal, more emotionally charged. Perhaps the most damning account came from a palace staffer who worked in communications, a department often responsible for drafting press statements, handling media inquiries, and managing narratives. According to this individual, there was a moment shortly after Meghan and Harry's wedding when an internal report was drafted, never published, that mentioned an incident of concern involving a private encounter between a senior royal and another. The language was vague, but the recipient of the report, the then private secretary to Prince William, allegedly flagged the file and requested it be sealed. Staff involved were told that discussing the document further would constitute a breach of their contract. To date, no one has seen the contents of that report outside the tight inner circle of senior aides and royals. But those who know of its existence describe it as the beginning of the end. The moment when trust within the family was irrevocably shaken. What exactly was in that report remains a mystery, but the very fact that it existed, however briefly, has fueled speculation and fear. Accounts from private security also emerged, albeit cautiously. One retired royal protection officer, who served during overlapping times with Meghan's introduction to the family, described being called unexpectedly to a side hallway at Windsor Castle during a small family reception. According to him, William had asked to be escorted out discreetly, claiming he was suddenly unwell. But the officer insists William looked anything but physically ill. He looked rattled, pale, and disturbed. It was after this incident, the officer claims, that William started requesting tighter control over his personal schedule and engagements. Then there's the account of a royal stylist, one who addressed both Meghan and Kate for numerous public outings. In private, the stylist told a friend, who later told a journalist, that Meghan once made a statement during a fitting that raised eyebrows. While trying on a dress for a Commonwealth Day event, Meghan reportedly said, "I can charm anyone I need to in this family. It's just about knowing where to push." The comment, delivered with a laugh, may have been casual, but in light of the later claims from William, it now holds a more chilling implication. Another former courtier, long retired, has gone on record saying that Meghan's charm and directness unsettled more people than just William. She claimed that Meghan, in the early days, operated as if she were already the most important woman in the family. According to this courtier, Meghan occasionally bypassed traditional lines of communication, speaking to senior members directly without going through aides or channels. This behavior was viewed as a break in hierarchy, and while not illegal, it broke an unspoken rule of royal conduct. But none of these leaks compare to the most recent and perhaps most serious revelation, an audio recording, never released publicly but reportedly played in private to a select few. According to an anonymous palace source, this recording is of a closed-door meeting between William, a senior royal advisor, and Prince Charles, now King Charles III. In it, William allegedly discusses a disturbing moment with Meghan. He doesn't describe it in explicit detail, but the tone, reportedly, is grim. He allegedly refers to the experience as an emotional violation and says, "I felt cornered." He adds, "She didn't just cross a line, she knew exactly where it was." The recording, if it exists, has been fiercely guarded. Only a handful of individuals are believed to have heard it. No transcripts exist publicly, and the palace has made no mention of it. But its existence has been whispered about in tight circles, journalists, security personnel, and even a few foreign diplomats. Some speculate that this recording is part of the reason why the royal family has refused to engage publicly with Meghan and Harry's accusations. They hold a card no one else has seen. Still, despite all these leaks, the palace has remained publicly silent. They do not confirm. They do not deny. But those who know how the monarchy operates say this silence is telling. In royal circles, no comment is often the loudest answer. It is a sign of containment, of not wanting to stir what could become an unmanageable media firestorm. Outside of the palace, those leaks have fueled public debate. Royal experts, authors, and even former BBC reporters have hinted that the rift between William and Harry wasn't just about press treatment or jealousy, it was about something deeper, something personal, something that William could not forgive. And when they say this, they're not referring to a simple disagreement about royal duties. They are referencing a wound far more personal. Among all the revelations, the thread remains consistent. William's behavior changed after a specific point in time. Before that, he had been protective, concerned, skeptical even. But after, he became distant, cold, and defensive. That shift, according to those closest to the inner workings of the family, was not accidental. It was deliberate. It was self-preservation. The impact of these insider accounts cannot be overstated. For a family whose power rests heavily on image and control, the loss of narrative ownership is a threat. If even a portion of these stories are true, the palace is sitting on a volcano, and the public, armed with only fragments, is beginning to put the pieces together. The question now is, what are they protecting, and how long can they protect it? It was a night the royal family would never publicly acknowledge. and one that those involved have gone to extraordinary lengths to erase, or at least bury so deeply within the halls of royal memory that it never again surfaces. Yet, like all secrets too heavy to remain buried, the truth has begun to seep out, piece by piece, word by word, from those who were there, those who were near, and those who overheard. The alleged private encounter between Meghan Markle and Prince William did not take place in a public space. It wasn't during a formal event, an engagement, or even a meeting with aides. It happened, according to multiple whispered accounts, in the most unguarded moment possible, a quiet evening in one of the family's private residences. No cameras, no press, no official witnesses, just a series of choices, decisions, and consequences that would ripple across years of royal dysfunction. It was the early months of Meghan's entry into the royal circle. Still new to the institution, she was immersed in learning protocols, mastering curtsies, and navigating a life of intense public scrutiny. She had recently moved into Nottingham Cottage with Harry, a modest home on the grounds of Kensington Palace that provided some measure of privacy amidst the looming press. William, living nearby with Kate and their children, would sometimes visit Harry for informal meetings or to catch up his brothers. Those casual family moments, once filled with laughter and a sense of continuity, had become more strained in recent months. Still, on this particular evening, Harry was reportedly away, attending a late meeting or charity engagement, leaving Meghan alone at the cottage. According to insider accounts, William had not initially intended to visit. He was reportedly passing by after attending a royal briefing elsewhere on the property when he decided to stop in, thinking Harry might be home. Security records show William's car arriving and parking briefly near the cottage. What happened next is the subject of both fascination and unease. Meghan greeted him at the door. She appeared surprised, but not uncomfortable. There are conflicting versions of what she was wearing, though several palace insiders say she was in a robe or lounge attire, suggesting she had settled in for the evening. William, always formal even in private settings, was reportedly dressed in his typical casual attire, tailored slacks, button-down shirt, no tie. According to a staff member who later heard about the encounter, Meghan offered him tea. He accepted, and they moved to the small sitting room. What should have been a brief, mundane visit reportedly took a turn. William, according to sources, intended to ask about an upcoming charity event both he and Meghan were scheduled to attend. The discussion began with small talk, how she was adjusting, how the press was treating her, how Harry was doing. Meghan, always articulate and charismatic, was said to be animated, possibly even flirtatious. Aides who later learned about the conversation say she made comments that could be interpreted as playful teasing, questioning William's stiffness, joking about how he needed to loosen up in public, comparing him to Harry. What followed is described, cautiously, as a moment of tension. Meghan allegedly sat closer than necessary, perhaps brushed his arm while laughing, leaned in during the conversation. William reportedly grew visibly uncomfortable. According to those who claim to have heard William's private retelling to a confidant, he tried to shift the conversation, to create space between them physically and emotionally. He stood up, perhaps in an effort to end the visit, but Meghan followed. Then, the line was allegedly crossed. William would not go into detail beyond stating that Meghan made a direct move, a touch that lingered too long, a gaze that was unmistakably suggestive, a statement whispered that carried a weight no sister-in-law should deliver. Some reports suggest she tried to kiss him. Others claim it was a verbal proposition framed with the kind of confidence that made rejection not only difficult, but confusing. William, caught completely off guard, allegedly froze. His instinct was not confrontation but distance. He excused himself, abruptly, and left. What he did next is debated. Some say he returned home and immediately confided in Kate, who was said to be livid. Others claim he went directly to his private office, pacing for nearly an hour before composing a message, possibly to his father, Prince Charles, or a senior aide. Regardless of the immediate steps, what followed were weeks of subtle yet profound changes in his behavior around Meghan. William reportedly told one or two trusted individuals about the encounter. His language was measured. He didn't accuse Meghan of assault or aggression. Instead, he used terms like boundary violation, deeply inappropriate, and unforgivable. According to one insider, he said, "It wasn't just about me. It was about what she thought she could do. The arrogance of it. There are no recordings, no official documents, no signed statements. just the recollections of those who were close enough to observe the emotional aftermath. They described William as deeply shaken, not because he feared Meghan in a physical sense, but because of the implications. What would happen if the story got out? Would anyone believe him? Would it tear the family apart? From Meghan's side, there was no indication that she felt regret or shame. She continued to appear at royal events, speak in interviews, and present herself as a woman navigating a hostile institution. Some palace insiders believe that she either did not see the encounter the same way or deliberately chose to pretend it hadn't happened. Her confidence remained unshaken, her gaze unflinching during events where she stood mere feet from William. Kate, according to close sources, became increasingly cold toward Meghan in the weeks following. What was once a tentative friendship turned into carefully choreographed interactions. William and Kate began arriving separately from Harry and Meghan. There were no more casual Sunday lunches. The smiles became forced. The space between them grew, not just physically, but emotionally. Eventually, Meghan and Harry's royal life began to unravel. Public interviews about mistreatment, private struggles, and media harassment began to dominate the narrative. But behind it all was this one private encounter, never publicly spoken of, but always lingering. A moment that transformed William's view of Meghan permanently, and perhaps solidified his belief that she never truly respected the family, the institution, or the boundaries that hold them together. In private, William reportedly said to a friend, "She didn't come here to support Harry. She came to take whatever she could. And when she didn't get it from him, she thought she could get it from me." These are strong words, and they may never be uttered on record. But those who know William describe them as entirely in character, not melodramatic, not exaggerated. Just blunt truth delivered in a moment of disillusionment. There are other rumors, some darker, some more ambiguous. One claims that Meghan later denied anything happened and accused William of inventing it due to his discomfort with her presence. Another suggests Harry eventually confronted William, which escalated into a shouting match so fierce that palace aides were forced to intervene. Neither brother has confirmed such an altercation, but their emotional separation since that period lends weight to the theory. What's clear is that something happened at night. Something unspeakable. Something that turned a cautious future king into a silent but resolute adversary of the Sussexes. And whatever it was, it's a truth that continues to cast a long shadow over the royal family, a truth that may never be spoken on camera, but lives loudly in the space between them. The quiet that followed Prince William's departure from Nottingham Cottage that night was not ordinary. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from a busy schedule or social formality. It was the silence of a man who had just experienced something profoundly unsettling. For a future king, trained from birth to maintain composure in even the most trying circumstances, it takes an event of great magnitude to shake him to his core. And that night, something had done just that. William didn't speak to many people in the immediate hours that followed. He reportedly returned to his own residence not with the usual royal guard or entourage, but with only his most trusted driver. According to one security detail who was on rotation that night, William sat in the back seat in silence for the entire ride. No calls, no casual remarks, no requests. His hands were clasped tightly, jaw clenched, eyes staring forward with a fixed, unreadable expression. But for those who had known William intimately for years, this wasn't his usual post-engagement demeanor. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. When he arrived home, aides say he went directly to his private study and closed the door. He did not speak to his children that evening. He did not greet Kate in their usual routine. Instead, he sat alone, reportedly without even switching on the lights. The room, barely lit by a single lamp, saw him pacing slowly, deep in thought. A glass of water remained untouched on the desk, and the messages piling up on his secure phone were ignored. According to one individual who passed by the study later that night, William's silhouette stood still by the window for over an hour, unmoving, as if wrestling with a decision he never thought he'd have to make. When Kate finally entered the room, concern already etched into her face, she found him distant and visibly disturbed. He didn't raise his voice, didn't offer dramatic retellings. Instead, he recounted the events in calm, measured tones, painful, deliberate, emotionally drained. As someone who had supported him through royal upheaval, relentless press attention, and family strife, Kate immediately sensed the weight of what he was carrying. But what shocked her more than the content of what he said was the look in his eyes, an expression she later described to a friend as betrayed and trapped. William reportedly said, "She crossed the line, Kate." It wasn't just about the moment. It was what it meant. She thinks we're pawns. All of us. He wasn't just speaking of discomfort or impropriety, he was speaking of a breach of dignity, a personal violation wrapped in political danger. In that private setting, it became clear to Kate that this wasn't merely an awkward moment gone wrong. It was a threat to the delicate balance the family had tried to maintain with Meghan and Harry since the beginning. Over the following days, William withdrew. He attended scheduled public events, shook hands, smiled for cameras, and nodded through royal engagements, but behind the scenes, aides reported a man more introspective than usual. He missed informal family lunches. He declined spontaneous visits with Harry, and he held unusually long private meetings with senior advisors, often shutting out all but his closest circle. There were no outbursts, no emotional collapses. Just an eerie stillness that suggested a man trying to process something too dangerous to speak of openly. One of his longest-serving advisors reportedly became alarmed when William asked a simple question during a briefing about upcoming royal appearances. What would happen if I just stopped showing up? While it was posed with a hint of irony, the tone behind the words was telling. William was shaken, not just by the personal implications of Meghan's alleged behavior, but by the possibility that anything he said or did from this point on could be weaponized. He was beginning to realize that he was not simply dealing with a difficult sister-in-law. He was facing an opponent who operated by different rules, who respected neither hierarchy nor history, and who had already demonstrated an unnerving comfort with crossing lines. Privately, William's reaction evolved into a form of silent resistance. He stopped accepting engagements that required close proximity to Meghan. He began requesting more detailed security briefings ahead of private events. At one point, he even requested to revise the seating arrangements for an upcoming formal dinner, insisting that under no circumstance should he be seated next to Meghan, even in a group setting. Palace staff who observed these changes began whispering among themselves. While the official explanation given for William's shift in demeanor was increased workload and press fatigue, those closer to the royal couple knew better. One longtime housekeeper reported overhearing a conversation between Kate and a confidant in which Kate said, "He doesn't even want to breathe the same air as her." The resentment, the discomfort, the sense of betrayal, it was growing heavier by the day. Behind closed doors, William explored whether he should escalate the matter. Should he speak with his father, Prince Charles? Should he file a formal complaint through palace channels? Should he confront Meghan directly? But each option came with consequences. If he went public, he risked destroying his brother's marriage, shattering what remained of royal unity, and inviting a media storm that could tear the monarchy apart. If he stayed silent, he risked carrying the burden alone, swallowing a violation that would eat away at his sense of security and trust. According to those familiar with his internal debate, William considered writing a private memo, not to press charges or raise legal accusations, but to document what had happened for the official royal record. He feared what might happen if similar boundaries were crossed with others, or if his silence someday came back to haunt him. Yet in the end, nothing was ever formally filed. The fear of escalation, the fallout it would cause, was too great. This silence, however, did not equal forgiveness. From that point forward, William's behavior toward Meghan changed fundamentally. He became colder, more formal, his tone clipped, and his words rehearsed. What once was an effort to give his brother's new wife the benefit of the doubt became a protective strategy: preserve appearances, minimize interaction, and keep her at arm's length at all costs. One moment in particular stood out to aides: a garden party at Buckingham Palace where all four, William, Kate, Harry, and Meghan, were expected to appear together for the cameras. According to multiple staffers, William made a point to arrive late, stand at a separate table, and only engage with Harry and Meghan in the briefest of passing acknowledgments. When asked about it later, he reportedly shrugged and said, "There's nothing left to say." Those who knew William best began to see cracks in his otherwise stoic armor. He became less willing to compromise on family matters involving Meghan. He no longer advocated for group appearances or reconciliation talks. Instead, he pushed for separation of responsibilities and an end to the shared Fab Four brand that had been launched months earlier. This was not a public feud, but a cold detachment that spoke volumes behind the palace gates. Kate, ever the quiet anchor in William's life, reportedly encouraged him to focus on the long-term view, on duty, the crown, and their children's legacy. But she, too, began to keep her distance from Meghan. The sisterhood that might have been was now impossible. The damage was done. And what of Harry? According to aides, William debated whether to tell his brother about the encounter directly. In some accounts, he tried and failed. In others, he decided that Harry either wouldn't believe him, or worse, would choose not to care. Whichever version is true, what followed was the most noticeable shift of all, the collapse of a brotherhood once held together by shared grief, loyalty, and a promise to always protect one another. William's shock wasn't just from what had happened. It was from what it meant, that the bond he thought was unbreakable could be shattered not by war or scandal, but by a single moment that upended everything he thought he understood about family, about loyalty, and about the woman his brother had chosen to bring into their world. The effects of that one night stretched far beyond personal discomfort. It was the seed of mistrust that would bloom into division, disillusionment, and eventually, public estrangement. What William experienced behind those closed doors may never be spoken of directly in a press release or televised statement. But in his actions, in his avoidance, in the hollowed-out relationship that now exists between two once-close brothers, the truth lingers like a shadow. And it's a shadow that continues to follow them both. In the rigid hierarchy of the British royal family, the fallout from an internal scandal is rarely visible to the public in real time. Instead, it simmers beneath the surface, affecting everything from seating arrangements at formal dinners to which engagements certain family members are assigned together. But for those within the inner sanctum, the aftermath of the alleged private encounter between Meghan Markle and Prince William triggered a silent, seismic shift in how the family functioned behind closed doors. It wasn't explosive, it wasn't even visible at first, but it was undeniable, and it began almost immediately. The first clear sign of fracture came in the form of nonverbal communication. Members of the palace staff, those who had long grown accustomed to reading the body language of royals, began noticing how carefully William now avoided Meghan's presence. Where once he would have offered her a polite greeting or engaged in light conversation during family gatherings, he now took on a far colder, more calculated demeanor. Meghan, in turn, seemed unfazed. If she sensed the change, she made no outward indication. She carried on as she always had, poised, confident, and socially commanding. But William had changed, and that change rippled through every corridor of royal life. According to one senior household insider, William quietly instructed his private secretary to ensure that he and Meghan would not be scheduled together for any private meetings or informal gatherings unless absolutely necessary. Aides were told to keep him informed of Meghan's location during joint events, and that any casual run-ins were to be minimized wherever possible. While not unusual for royals to request logistical coordination, this level of precaution was outside the norm. It reflected a new reality, one in which William no longer trusted being alone in the same room as his brother's wife. At first, this withdrawal was chalked up by some to professional tension. The media was abuzz with speculation over the Fab Four. The nickname given to William, Kate, Harry, and Meghan, as cracks began to show in their carefully curated unity. But behind palace walls, insiders whispered that the situation was far more personal than public relations would ever admit. Kate Middleton, fiercely loyal to William and fiercely protective of her family, felt the effects too. Where she had once played mediator, gently trying to bridge the differences between Meghan and the rest of the family, she now withdrew. Her interactions with Meghan became purely functional. There was no more warmth, no more shared moments or laughter behind the scenes. One former palace aide described it as an invisible curtain between the couples, one that grew thicker by the week. The Queen, ever observant and deeply invested in the unity of her family, was not oblivious to these shifts. Though the monarch rarely interfered in personal disputes, she relied heavily on her private secretary to monitor tension among senior royals. Reports reaching her desk began to contain subtle but repeated references to friction between the Cambridges and the Sussexes, specifically, unexplained changes in how William engaged with Meghan. Privately, the Queen is said to have summoned Charles and William for a confidential meeting at Windsor. The objective, officially, was to discuss the modernization of royal duties post-Meghan's arrival. Unofficially, it was a temperature check on a family unit that appeared increasingly fractured. During this conversation, William reportedly avoided detailing the alleged incident outright. Instead, he spoke of irreparable differences, a loss of trust, and an inability to see the family's interests protected with certain individuals involved. Charles, who had long been eager to keep the peace, suggested a formal family intervention, a controlled, private setting where grievances could be aired and misunderstandings addressed. William rejected the idea. His tone, according to those briefed on the meeting, was resolute. "There is no misunderstanding," he allegedly said. "There is only what happened." The fallout extended to staff arrangements as well. Members of the Kensington Palace team began to report an increased level of tension between departments. While Harry and Meghan were transitioning toward forming their own office, the overlap between their team and William and Kate's remained awkward. One communications officer claimed that memos involving Meghan were frequently delayed or reviewed more heavily before being approved for internal distribution. "We were walking on eggshells," she said, because no one wanted to be caught in the middle. Behind the scenes, the stress began to mount. William grew more visibly agitated during internal meetings. He reportedly spent longer hours in his private study, refused to take calls from certain advisors he once trusted, and even suggested taking time away from royal duties to recalibrate. Kate, ever the pillar, tried to hold their schedule together, even as she noticed her husband becoming more emotionally distant. Not from her, but from the institution he had sworn to uphold. It was around this time that discussions began about a new living arrangement. The Cambridges had been residing at Kensington Palace, while Harry and Meghan lived in close proximity at Nottingham Cottage. But the proximity was now untenable. William's discomfort was no longer manageable through internal scheduling alone. He needed space, not just physically, but emotionally. Soon after, Harry and Meghan were offered Frogmore Cottage as a new home base, farther from central London, more secluded, and, crucially, not within walking distance of the Cambridges. Publicly, this move was described as a natural evolution for the young couple, an opportunity for them to prepare for family life and greater independence. Privately, insiders confirmed that it was an intentional separation, driven by a desire to de-escalate a situation that was growing more volatile with every passing week. The Queen was briefed regularly, and her expression reportedly grew grimmer with each update. While she had weathered family tensions before, from the divorces of her children to the fallout after Diana's death, this was different. It wasn't just scandal. It was betrayal. The kind that couldn't be plastered over with photo ops and charity events. And it was spreading. The household staff began taking sides, even if unofficially. Some who worked closely with Meghan believed that William was overreacting, or that there had been a misunderstanding he had blown out of proportion. Others, especially those in William and Kate's direct employ, felt a growing sense of resentment toward Meghan, not just for the alleged behavior, but for the toll it was taking on the man who was supposed to one day wear the crown. One source recounted a private staff meeting where William reportedly said, "I am not here to be manipulated. I am here to serve this country, and I will not be compromised." The comment was met with silence. But among those who heard it, the message was clear: a boundary had been breached, and it was unlikely ever to be restored. As the months rolled on, the fallout became more evident in public. Engagements that once featured all four royals now featured just two at a time. Press briefings about the couples were handled separately. Even holiday arrangements, once shared at Sandringham, were now carefully staggered to avoid prolonged contact. Tension spilled over into the Sussexes' interactions with the media. When Harry and Meghan sat down for interviews where they hinted at being unsupported and surrounded by toxicity, William's silence was telling. There was no public defense, no brotherly intervention. The ties had frayed too far. According to one high-ranking aide, a final attempt was made to reconcile, an informal dinner organized at Charles's request. The idea was to gather the four at Balmoral in a relaxed setting, away from the press. It was meant to be private, low pressure, and focused on rebuilding trust. William reportedly refused to attend. When pressed, he said only, "There's nothing left to rebuild." The private fallout from that one encounter had now transformed into a full-scale, emotional divorce. Not the kind that ends with press releases and tabloids, but the kind that lingers in the way people look away in hallways, the cold greetings, the withdrawn support. William had made his decision. He would protect the institution, protect his family, and protect his dignity. And whatever had happened that night at Nottingham Cottage, he was done trying to pretend it hadn't changed everything. As the rift deepened behind palace walls, outside in the public eye, Meghan Markle's ascent as a global figure was still gaining momentum. The media, hungry for a new royal sensation, had crowned her the modern Duchess almost overnight. The moment she stepped out with Harry at their first official engagement in Nottingham, everything about her seemed to signal change. Her confidence, her voice, her cultural identity, her sense of purpose. To the world, she wasn't just marrying into the royal family. She was about to redefine it. But that meteoric rise was not without consequence, especially when viewed from within an institution rooted in restraint, hierarchy, and unspoken codes of behavior. Internally, while Prince William wrestled with personal boundaries and emotional betrayal, Meghan was moving through the royal ranks with swift ambition. She immersed herself in causes from women's empowerment to racial equality, appearing at events with poise and charisma. Her speeches were articulate, often unscripted, and delivered with the ease of someone used to speaking to an audience. For many younger observers, Meghan represented exactly what the monarchy needed: a breath of modern air, a break from tradition, someone who wasn't afraid to speak plainly and show emotion. But for some within the palace, including William, her rise was less of a revival and more of a disruption. It wasn't just that Meghan was confident, it was that she appeared to bypass the natural progression every other royal had to follow. Whereas Kate Middleton had taken years to find her voice publicly, moving slowly through a careful process of grooming, Meghan had launched herself into the spotlight within months. There were no tentative steps, no waiting periods. She wasn't just stepping into her role, she was running with it. A few months into her royal tenure, Meghan guest-edited an issue of British Vogue. It was an unprecedented move. No royal had ever taken the reins of such a high-profile publication before. The issue, titled Forces for Change, featured activists, campaigners, and thought leaders rather than members of the royal family. Some praised it as groundbreaking. Others inside the palace saw it as stepping far outside traditional boundaries. William, according to Palace Whispers, was not consulted, and that lack of inclusion was noted, even if it wasn't publicly addressed. Meghan's social media presence also became a point of tension. While the Sussex royal Instagram page was officially sanctioned, insiders say Meghan was directly involved in curating its content, writing captions, selecting images, and choosing causes to spotlight. Posts often focused on progressive topics, mental health, systemic injustice, climate change, issues that, while important, edged close to the line of political commentary. For William, who had been raised under the mantra of royal neutrality, this approach felt reckless. The monarchy, in his view, was not a platform for opinion. It was a symbol of unity, of balance, of dignified silence. Meanwhile, Meghan's wardrobe choices, her circle of celebrity friends, and her tendency to engage directly with the press made her even more polarizing. Where William and Kate leaned into traditional British designers and low-key elegance, Meghan embraced international brands and Hollywood stylists. She formed friendships with Serena Williams, Oprah Winfrey, and Amal Clooney, names that glittered in the American celebrity sphere but felt foreign within the walls of Buckingham Palace. Her rapid embrace of fame, combined with the widespread public adoration she was receiving in some quarters, made Meghan both a media darling and a source of internal unrest. According to a senior courtier, William once remarked privately, "She's building a brand, not a legacy." The statement revealed more than frustration. It spoke to a fundamental difference in philosophy. For William, royal service was about quiet endurance. For Meghan, it seemed, it was about platform and visibility. To her credit, Meghan did work. She took on patronages with passion and contributed meaningfully to projects. Her cookbook, Together, raised significant funds for the victims of the Grenfell Tower fire. She launched the Smart Works clothing capsule collection to help women return to the workforce. She gave speeches at the UN and during Commonwealth events. Her supporters would say she was one of the most hard-working and visible newcomers the royal family had seen in decades. But with that rise came whispers. Whispers of tension with staff, of demands that strained traditional protocols, of briefings and counter-briefings. William's team, increasingly wary of the pace and tone of Meghan's rise, allegedly began expressing concerns to senior advisors. Not about her causes or competence, but about her disregard for the chain of command and her tendency to act unilaterally. Within the family, this tension was exacerbated by Harry's growing defensiveness. As Meghan soared, Harry became increasingly protective. He saw any criticism of her, whether from staff or family, as rooted in jealousy or bias. And he was quick to shut down any conversation that suggested Meghan slow down or adapt. The effect was a couple moving faster and louder, carving their own path through the monarchy, even as others tried to maintain the established order. William, more than anyone, saw the storm coming. He sensed that the Sussexes' trajectory, fueled by global attention, individual branding, and emotional transparency, would soon clash headlong with the structure and silence the monarchy relied on to survive. The institution, in William's eyes, was being bent to fit one couple's ambitions, and he feared that bend would eventually break the crown. Even within public engagements, William and Meghan's interactions became telling. They were professional, composed, but cool. No private exchanges. No casual smiles. Just measured distance. At one event, when both couples appeared for a mental health initiative, body language experts noted that William barely turned his head toward Meghan once during the entire 40-minute panel. She, in turn, never acknowledged him directly. It was as if an invisible line had been drawn between them, and neither dared to cross it. While the public continued to speculate on rifts between the brothers, the more significant fracture, the one between William and Meghan, went largely unspoken. But insiders knew. Every choice Meghan made, every bold speech, unconventional move, or glamorous public appearance, was, to William, another reminder of how far the royal dynamic had shifted. He watched as the media painted her as a transformative force and saw little acknowledgement of the damage being left in her wake. To some observers within the palace, Meghan's rise felt like a calculated strategy. Not malicious, but meticulously crafted. A seasoned actress and campaigner, she knew how to command attention, how to create emotional resonance, and how to drive narrative. And in the world of royalty, where every gesture is loaded with symbolism, that kind of control was both powerful and dangerous. Her supporters called her brave. Her critics called her disruptive. William, caught in the middle, called her something else entirely in private. Unpredictable. By the time 2019 was drawing to a close, the internal divisions were no longer just whispers. Meghan's rise had reached its peak, but at great cost. The family was split in two. The institution was straining to keep up. And William, still reeling from the personal boundary he believed had been violated months earlier, was now watching the entire royal machine shift toward instability, all under the influence of a woman he no longer trusted, no longer respected, and no longer wished to engage with in any capacity. No rift within the royal family has attracted more scrutiny, sorrow, or speculation than the one between Prince William and Prince Harry. Once brothers who stood side by side in the darkest moments of their young lives, who supported one another through scandal, heartbreak, and global attention, they are now the symbol of division in a monarchy that was once synonymous with stability. But what if the true cause of that rift wasn't as simple as media pressure, marital tension, or divergent royal philosophies? What if, at the heart of it, lay a single moment, a private incident, an alleged act by Meghan Markle that William could not forgive and Harry could not face? As whispers of Meghan's alleged approach toward William began to circulate within the walls of the royal household, Harry remained publicly steadfast in his support of his wife. To the world, he was a man devoted to Meghan, protective, emotionally open, and determined to shield her from the very system that, in his view, had destroyed his mother. But internally, the first tremors of something deeper had begun to form. Harry had always been close with William. Their relationship was forged in fire, losing their mother, enduring the expectations of royalty, and growing up in a palace that was often colder behind the scenes than it appeared in public. William was the steady presence. Harry, the spirited one. But they balanced each other. It was a brotherhood many believed would last a lifetime. And for years, it did. So when Harry first began hearing murmurs of discomfort from William regarding Meghan, his instinct was not to believe them. He saw in Meghan a partner who loved him, who supported him, who shared his desire for freedom from the rigid expectations of the crown. From the earliest days of their courtship, Harry was fiercely protective. Any criticism of Meghan, however valid or gently expressed, was taken as an attack. According to those close to Harry, the first real strain appeared when William allegedly advised him to take his time with the relationship. The warning wasn't aggressive or dismissive, but Harry reportedly took it as an insult. He interpreted William's hesitation not as brotherly concern but as disapproval. From that moment, a small seed of mistrust was planted. But it wasn't until months later, after the wedding, after Meghan had begun her public duties, and after the alleged private encounter between her and William, that things truly unraveled. According to palace insiders, William wrestled for some time with whether to tell Harry what had happened. He knew the risk. The possibility that Harry would not believe him, that he would view the story as a smear, that the foundation of their relationship would crack beyond repair. But William also knew he couldn't continue the facade, not with his sense of trust shattered and his ability to interact with Meghan in any capacity compromised. The exact details of how William approached the subject with Harry remain guarded, but according to multiple sources, the conversation did happen. It was private, tense, emotional. William did not accuse Meghan of criminal behavior. He did not shout or issue ultimatums. He simply told his brother, in carefully chosen words, that something had occurred between himself and Meghan, something inappropriate, uninvited, and impossible to forget. Harry's reaction was immediate and explosive. One insider described Harry's face as going white, his eyes wide with disbelief. At first, he reportedly asked William if he was joking, if this was some twisted form of royal hazing or jealousy. When William insisted he was serious, that it had deeply affected him and altered his ability to trust Meghan, Harry stood up.